It's time for the Access of Easy podcast, the weekly technology digest that keeps you ahead of the curve. Brought to you by EasyDNS.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to Access of Easy. This is the podcast sidekick, the podcast affiliate, the podcast conciliary to the weekly newsletter, where you can find the latest and greatest in data breach and overreach. And my name is Joey. That's Len. What's going on, buddy? Happy Thursday afternoon here.
It's a Friday to me, Joey. But yeah, happy Thursday, Friday to you as well. Doesn't it seem like it's winter approaching very quickly?
It's coming, man. I walked my dog. I don't know. I guess just over the lunch hour there, maybe a little before the lunch hour, if I'm being honest. And man, Len, I had to wear a long sleeve shirt. It wasn't that warm. Yeah, it's starting to cool down a bit.
Unfortunately, but if you look at the next few days, I think starting Monday, it's going to be decent weather again. So
nice.
Just in time for us to go back to work.
Can't wait.
Wonderful. The weekend sucks, but whatever. I'll take whatever we could get, to be honest. Every day is a blessing.
You and me both, man. You and me both. So we got some banger stories here. We got Telegram, we got Simply Bitcoin, we got Uber, and I dare say a positive Zuckerberg story. Where do you want to start?
Well, the quote we have.
The quote. Oh my God, I'm slacking here. This week's or last week's quote, I should say. There has now been created a world in which the success of others is a grievance rather than an example. That was by Thomas Sowell. I don't know how to say his last name. Thomas Sowell, I think. So George, you win that one. Thomas Sowell, economist. This week's quote: "The soul, spelled differently, of course, contains the event that shall befall it." Interesting. Yeah, very deep there. That's better than what you see in most fortune cookies. If you know who that was from, without searching, obviously, put it in the comments there, and you get your next round of renewals on EasyDNS on the house. Can't beat that. If you can pull some knowledge about who said that and post it on the website. Okay, now let's go to the stories. Where do you want to start?
Telegram.
Sure.
Because their CEO Pavel Durov. I hope I pronounced his name right. I
think so.
I haven't watched any videos on this. I've read countless articles. Well, people wonder who the heck this guy is. He's the guy that's in charge, created the face of Telegram, so to speak. And he is now in custody in France. And this guy is a French and Russian citizen. Originally Russian, eventually became a French citizen not too long ago. And he flies quite a bit in his private jet. And trying to leave France, well, he was apprehended because apparently his chat app, Telegram, has been propagating stuff like various crimes, including terrorism, narcotics, trafficking, and fraud, and a whole bunch of other things. Now, let's be honest, what's going on in Europe, this is going to be a real problem for those that are administering these social media platforms. Stuff like Signal will probably fly under the radar, but that's just my opinion. But others like X, Meta, Instagram, a whole bunch of others are going to have to subside to all the rules over there. If not, well, maybe Zuckerberg and others and will be captured by the authorities. Either way, they were able to apprehend this guy and find him rather easily because his girlfriend is she's very active on social media and she posts a lot of pictures. And it's easy to just simply do a location. She
didn't even make it like difficult so that you had to do a search. She was taking pictures and geotagging them and taking pictures in front of like obvious landmarks. And do you know what her profession was, by the way?
I have no clue.
Crypto coach. Like this.
Oh, that's right.
Did this guy get scammed by some Instagram dime? He might have. Like, honestly, he might have just been. That's unbelievable, dude. Unbelievable. I mean, this guy is notorious for wanting to father about 1 billion children. But just keep going the sperm donor route. Don't give up your privacy for, a piece of ass. Sorry, excuse my French here, but God, this looks like it might have cost him, doesn't it?
Yeah, and so people that are wondering about this, though, how it's going to impact Telegram or anything moving forward. I know there was an altcoin, and I'm being very, I'm choosing my words correctly here for this program that's associated with this, and I do not want to talk about this, but actually Telegram itself, it's a heavily used app. I think 900 million users in total are using it, but not just that, there is a sense that there is some security when you do use it. Now, when you do use it, keep in mind that a lot of this is not encrypted, especially when you're in group chats. There's no encryption over there. I believe you can enable some encryption from individual to user type texting or type messaging. However, when you ever load up a new Telegram, or if you load up your old Telegram account on a new computer or a new phone, you will notice that all your history, the messages and everything are there. Where is it stored? Clearly, it's not stored centrally on your phone. It's stored somewhere else. So if you're using this and sending out information that you want to keep secure, I would recommend don't use Telegram. There are other options out there. Keat comes to mind, Signal comes to mind. Just do your research. You'll find something that's better. Telegram does not fit that bill. But this is the news story. And you're right. Has this guy been had by potentially a CIA agent or somebody else because of the companies?
Some of the stories, Len, like Macron maybe invited him for dinner. He's not in custody anymore, this fellow. He was released from custody. Number of reasons maybe for that, including this, entrapment theory where Macron, illegally brought the guy in for other reasons. The other theory that is interesting is this UAE influence. Have you heard of this?
No.
So the UAE and France had a deal for, I think, I want to say it was like $80 billion in fighter jets and maybe other military equipment. And the UAE basically said the deal's off unless you let this guy go. And now he's not in custody anymore. I think they're looking for his brother in France as well. Maybe it's quite a story. I don't think enough people are really talking about this. We live in this sort of generously 24-hour news cycle at this point, but this was a pretty big story because I think the charges he was drummed up on really are crazy, right? Like, possession of CP or like facilitating CP because people on his app might do it. And, other stuff about basically moderating the content of private messages. Like, does Apple come under fire for that, for iMessage? iMessage famously, impossible to get through for law enforcement or for Apple. I never see them taking any flack. Instagram and Facebook, Meta, I should say, had a problem with grooming maybe on the platform several years ago. Yeah. Never a suit. I mean, clearly what you're seeing here, at least in my opinion, is a guy who refused to bend the knee, and he's paying the price for it with his freedom, right? I mean, his life is going to be forever changed by this incident. And like I mentioned, he's not in custody anymore, but this is not the last we will hear about this story, I don't think.
Think of all the robberies that has happened throughout history.
Yeah.
Bank robberies, for instance, and every one of them had to use probably Michelin or Firestone or some sort of tire in order to get away. We should be going after these tire manufacturers as well.
The manufacturer of the Bic pen. How about that? How many
checks were signed with that were fraudulent? Yeah. So it's opening up doors to a whole bunch of things. Anyway, let's move on. About this Qilin ransomware group. I think I pronounced the name correctly.
The Q followed by the I is like an absolute travesty in the English in the English language. There needs to be a U in there somewhere. What is this? Q right to the I. Whose idea was this? 0 out of 10 for the name. 0 out of 5. 100%. Just for that faux pas. 0 out of 5.
100%. Anyways, it's a new tactic that's being deployed by the Qilin ransomware group, and it's to try to steal credentials from Chrome browsers. And this could potentially allow hackers the ability to gain access to a bunch of accounts and services that are associated with Chrome browsers. And the question is how? Well, briefly, the attackers use a group policy object, the GPO, to execute a script that stole credentials in Chrome. And this could give them access to stuff like bank accounts, email accounts, and other sensitive information. So the gist of this article says that if you use stuff like 2FA or MFA, it's one way to protect yourself, but I would suggest a better way is just don't use Chrome. Right? Like, why would you want to? I know it's the most widely used browser in the world.
It's not a good browser though. It's a resource hog. It's not secure, clearly. I don't know. I feel bad because I'm not going to say anything about the story, but come on, guys. You're right, Len. Just stop using it. Why are you still using Chrome? There's a million other options that are better, but people still rely on this thing. I guess because it's just Google, right? People like Google products, but
they're easy to whip on them. Anyways, Uber Looks like they're facing some fines over in the EU because the Dutch Data Protection Authority, this is the DPA, they levied a fine against Uber, and this is around 290 million euro.
Yeah.
And Uber, why did they receive this? Is because they were violating something called the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. And the reason for these fines lie in the transfer of data that Uber had, and it's personal data, and it's personal data of European drivers, and this information was sent to the United States. And the GDPR imposes very strict regulations on a transfer of personal data outside the European Economic Area. This is because the EU considers some of the non-EEA countries, including the United States, that they have lack of adequate safeguards to protect personal privacy. So it seems odd that they think the US doesn't have the ability to protect data, but either way, they determined that the Uber, they lack the necessary safeguards in place to secure the data and send it over, and as a result, sending it, well, $290 million they were fined. Think of all the data they have, the personal data that they have.
Tons.
Rather than focusing on the fine itself, I would just wonder, like, they have a treasure trove of information. And
you've talked about this on the show before, Len.
Have I specifically about Uber?
I think we talk about a lot of like location data stuff for coming from phones, but I think you've mentioned in the past, to your credit, that this is a real treasure trove. People, like, where they're getting rides and where they're going is significant. Time of day and whatnot. Like, it is a big treasure trove. You're right.
Yeah, so getting that information could be disastrous for whoever lends or gets their hands on it. So just think about that. If you're ever going to use Uber moving forward or something along those lines, somebody's getting your information, and what are they going to do with it? Well, you can only guess.
Yeah, 100%. Do you think there's going to be a push to go back to sort of cash taxis at some point?
Be sweet if they do.
It's kind of funny, right? Like, you find yourself, as I lean over to put my energy drink down. Energy drinks are terrible for you. You shouldn't be drinking them, but I'm so tired today. You kind of, like, if you look around, and this could be because we're siloed in the Bitcoin sphere a little bit, but man, I find that more and more people are looking for ways to maybe pay a little more and have a little more of an inconvenient sort of product consumption journey if it means less data is shared and more privacy is available to you as the user. You're seeing that more and more, aren't we? Are you? And like I said, maybe it's because we're just in Bitcoin and it's like a thing in that space. But I think a lot of people are going to start thinking this way because more and more people are realizing, like, holy man, everything I do, someone is like tagging my name, adding metadata, using it against me in advertising and all kinds of stuff. And like, it's getting worse and worse. So I think people will try and do this at some point, right? The question for governments, I think, and GDPR has been the subject of a lot of debate. There's good and bad about GDPR, but the thing for governments is, like, do you actually want to protect the privacy of citizens the way that these laws and regulations and legislation seem to suggest you do? If that's the case, then you really have to allow citizens to pay privately with cash or to exist privately online, right? But what I actually see, and I'll speak for you too, I'm sure you agree with this. What I actually see is legislation, Peter is putting in legislation like GDPR, but Paul is telling you that you have to verify your identity online, that you can't post anonymously on Twitter, that you can't use cash, that anything over $1,000 has to be reported to the government, like all this stuff, right? Like they're actually removing privacies with the other hand. So I think there's a reckoning coming here because more and more people, like I mentioned, are starting to think about convenience as a trap a little bit. And eventually governments are going to have to reckon with, well, you said you were going to protect our privacy and now you're taking away this option, right? So how do you fix it? What is the outcome here? I don't know, but those are divergent paths. You can't do both of them at the same time. You have to, choose your way, Western man, as the saying goes.
Yeah, there are options available, but it's limited right now, and that window's closing, unfortunately. But
yeah,
let's talk about what's going on with Facebook and Zuckerberg. And Zuck came out a few days ago, and he came out swinging against the White House, as apparently they had, quote, reportedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire, and expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree, end quote. So remember, it wasn't too long ago that they were getting canceled and or kicked off social media altogether, simply for not just agreeing with the narrative of the day. And it seems that the narrative that was being pushed upon folks is, if Zuckerberg is correct, well, this is quite a shock. Because remember, Facebook, they have millions of users, and they were pushing these people to take COVID vaccines. And here's another quote from him. He says, "They were wrong, and I regret that we were not more outspoken about it." And he says also, quote, "Made some choices that, with the benefit of hindsight and new information, we wouldn't make today. I feel strongly that we should not compromise our content standards due to pressure from any administration in either direction. And we're ready to push back if something like this happens again," end quote. These are words from his mouth. Yeah. So remember,
it's from a letter. It's from a letter. He wrote a public letter. So it's not like he just went to the, the board with this. Is publicly released. It's a shot. It's meant to be a shot.
And remember, not too long ago, we also had Twitter files. We seem to have forgotten this, but remember, a quote from Twitter, they said, "Directly pressed Twitter executives to moderate the platform's pandemic content according to their wishes." This is from the White House. So again, what Zuck, he's saying that they were suppressing news even about the Hunter Biden laptop. That's another thing. So but all I have to figure, I'm asking here, what happened between then and now? What is
I know exactly what happened.
Inform me.
He started working out. And I told you on this show like 6 months ago, or on our show 6 months ago, no one is ready for TRT Zuck, for masculine, like fight ready Zuckerberg. Because what you cannot have is a guy who controls maybe the most information on the planet going against the narrative, and he's not going back. I will stand by this till the day I die. The only thing separating an eternally conservative government in every Western state from being a real thing that's irreversible is everyone going to the gym. And like, it's funny to say, it's funny to talk about, but Len, you're asking the right question. What changed? The only thing that changed is that this guy started going to the gym. That's it. I honestly believe that. And he has no, there's no tailwind on him for putting this letter out there. What is he gaining from this?
I don't know. And I'm wondering
nothing. His entire user base is liberal, right? They had to make a Twitter clone because his user base didn't even want to see anything conservative on their timeline, let alone tweet to people who are conservative. So they started Threads. Instagram regulated, deplatformed, de-amplified, all this stuff, like you mentioned during COVID, the laptop, all these other stories. God knows how many others there have been. This guy has no reason to do this except that he's had a change of heart. And I'll tell you, Len, it started with him being able to squat 225. That is the difference. And as that guy's shoulders get bigger and his hair gets longer and his 5 o'clock shadow becomes more pronounced, his hand calluses become rougher, you're going to see this guy really change his tune. I look forward to his next appearance on Rogan. I suspect there will be one before the end of the year. And I think it's really going to be a good appearance. I'm putting that out there now.
Let's talk about this zero vulnerability in Versa networks. And this is the Versa's SD-WAN director software. And this is an exploit that's been done by the Volt Typhoon threat actor. So a lot of different names here, Joey. So Versa, anyways, first off, this vulnerability allowed attackers to gain privileged access to Versa director servers and also get access to sensitive user stored information on those servers. But what is Versa director? Never heard about it before, but it's a component of the Versa network software. And it allowed organizations to centrally configure, manage, and monitor network device management, and also traffic routing, security policies, and other things. So it's a very powerful tool within the networking world. And I suspect, given what's going on here, that those working and using this type of software, they'll be happy to know in a not too distant future some credit monitoring service is going to be handed out to them for about a year's worth of time. So good for them. They're going to be able to use credit monitoring to see if they got owned in the process. But never heard of this software before, but doesn't mean it's not very important. Haven't heard of a heck of a lot of things that really impact my life. So it's interesting. If you're running this, keep in mind you may have been compromised as a result.
This is a pretty dense article that, I had trouble getting my head around. I'll be honest. What is the lesson here, right? Just keep an eye on reports about software you're using, especially because it looks like this is maybe corporate level software. So, you know, do whatever you have to do. Yeah, ISPs, MSPs, and larger organizations. So, I mean, it's not for me and you. It may not be for many listeners, but the point is that the companies to whom you are a patron may be influenced by this. So, enjoy your free year credit monitoring, I suppose.
Exactly.
Stack it up. You have to put it in your will pretty soon, like we said last week. Going to be so many years. I'm only going to live to be 70 or 80 probably. So, want to make sure you get those years to your kids.
Simply
Oh,
Bitcoin.
God. Yeah.
They're
what
a
story.
very popular Bitcoin show. I think they do a daily show, or they
Yeah.
used to. Maybe still do. I'm not sure.
I think they
Someone
still do.
listen to them. Either way, they've been banned, kicked off, whatever you want to call it, off YouTube, not Twitter, on YouTube. And they raised a stink about this, and eventually they were let back on YouTube. Apparently, you have some. I don't know if you still have the same type of.
I can't because they were reinstated. I thought maybe it was because you know, when you hire like promotional companies to help you with thumbnails and whatnot, it really isn't that company's best interest to see your plays go up. And so as part of the fee, sort of a shadow part of the fee, they may buy plays for videos on which they work. That was my base case. Again, not to say that Nico and Opti are buying views. I don't think they are, but it's possible if you have someone doing your thumbnails, they could be doing it. But they're back on, which is great because Mark is going on in September. So if you want to see Mark on Simply Bitcoin, you can do it in September. It's interesting that YouTube seems to like. They seem to have a knack for grabbing channels that have huge Twitter influence too, right? And so like one thing I've been able to deduce about the way that these things get handled at YouTube is that if you have a Twitter following that's like 10 or 15,000 strong or more, you're generally going to get some attention from somebody on the platform and maybe assigned a special agent or whatever. I think that was the case here. The question I have is like, why are these guys getting hit, right? Like Lotus Eaters is a podcast from it's out of the UK. I think Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin does. He's either the host or a co-host of that show. They talk about, you know, UK culture. You can imagine what that show is like these days with the riots. They've been targeted. George Gammon's Rebel Capitalist on the list too of shows that have been taken down. The most generous interpretation is that they do it by mistake, or they say this is promoting, this is content that we don't want on the platform because it's, I don't know, hateful to normies or something like that. Who knows, right? Whatever the people at YouTube think. Some purple hair, moderator over there. But the less generous interpretation is that this is like going to start happening more and more because pretty soon there's going to be a clear problem with currencies. And as there becomes a clear problem with currencies, even for the normies, people will want to hear about it. And when they hear about it, it gets worse, right? Like the actions taken to protect oneself get more severe, which further damages the currency, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have to go on and on about that, but I think this is sort of a weird time we find ourselves in, right? You know, harmful content, malinformation is another one that I've heard, right? You know, they come up with a new term. Yeah. So it's not misinformation. It's not misinformation or disinformation, but rather information that's, you know, a bit of a headwind to a government initiative, right? Even if it's true, it doesn't need to be shared. Facebook talked about this in the past as well. You're in a weird spot. And I think if anything, like, not to make this about Bitcoin or even gold, but if anything, you have to start wondering just how weak the state is becoming in its own eyes, that it thinks it has to censor, you know, two guys in their living rooms, you know, talking about Bitcoin, or George Gammon talking on his whiteboard about government debt, or the Lotus Eaters talking about the UK riots or whatever. Like you have to wonder how weak the government is appearing in the mirror. And I think that's a metric to keep an eye on. You know, how many YouTube channels are being banned? How many people are being told they can't say certain things, right? You got Starmer in the UK. Obviously, we talked about him. It's I hate using the word scary, but you know, it's interesting. Let's just say that, you know, as the saying goes, may you live in interesting times. I think we've been granted that, at least.
Yeah. So be careful with what you do on YouTube or Twitter, or not Twitter, more so YouTube. And yeah, you might be subjected to something.
How would all this look without Twitter, by the way? Like if Jack Dorsey still owned Twitter, And that like that Indian lawyer, I can't remember her name. She went on Rogan with him. And Rogan and Tim Pool like really tore it to bits. I think she cried in front of Congress too, over the COVID stuff. Like how would this look? Twitter's the only place where you can say basically whatever you want.
It's Noster, but you're right.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like the public square truly is Twitter now, and Musk is just uninterested in playing ball with anybody of any stripe by the looks of it. I mean, he's supporting a candidate for president, but broadly speaking, like politically, he wants you to be able to say whatever you think, and if you got a point to make, you can make it there. It's incredible, right? But we were so close to not having that option, and yeah, you got to be thankful for that for sure.
Yeah, good episode though.
Yeah, we're done. Take care, everyone. See you next week. Yeah, more of the latest greatest data breach and overreach, and take care of yourselves until then.
Take care.